I wish to write of Crocodilopolis. Shetet, the city was called in the beginning of things, Shetet, or the reclaimed, for the Egyptians stole land from the water, and made it the capital of their great lake Provence, which Ptolemy Philadelphus renamed to please his adored wife. Queen Arsinoe was charming, no doubt, and the Greek ruins and papyri of her day are interesting, but it is the city sacred to the crocodile god Sebek which can alone distract my thoughts now from the tragedy of the Black Lamb. If his Ka refuses to go, I shall set crocodiles at it, ghosts of crocodiles mummied somewhere under the desert hills which separates the Fayoum from the Nile Valley. We drove out to the ruins in a string of hired carriages at an incredibly early hour this morning. As the night was one long dog howl, and the dawn one overwhelming cock crow, people were thankful to get up. But what a waste of hardly obtained baths from the start! Between Medinet and Crocodilopolis rose a solid wall of red dust. We had to break through it as firemen dash through the smoke of a burning house, and when our arabeahs stopped at the foot of a mountainous mound, about a mile out of Medinet, the dust had come too. Scrambling up with the wind on our backs, we began to breathe, but it was not until we had ascended to the old guard house on top of the pottery-strewn height that we could draw a clean breath. Then the reward was worth the pains. Down below us, as seen from a bird's-eye view, lay a vast, unroofed honeycomb. Its size was incredible. The thing could not really be there. It was a startling dream, that endless gold-brown city of regular streets, and mud-brick buildings, big and small, shops and houses, theatres and libraries, lacking only their roofs, deserted save by ghosts for thousands of years, yet looking as though it had been destroyed by a cyclone yesterday. Down there in the devastated beehive myriads of bees still worked frantically, human bees, which Cleopatra said were reincarnations of those who had owned slaves and killed them with forced labour, when Shetet was among the richest cities of the two lands. These bees of today work to destroy, not to recreate, for the crumbling brick is the best of fertilizers, and fertilizing their land is the one great interest in life for the fellaheen of the Fayoum. Furiously they tore at the remaining walls, furiously they packed away their treasure of dried mud in sacks, furiously they piled it on backs of donkeys and rushed away to make room for others. Each instant hundreds of wild figures in dusty black or blue scampered off, beating loaded donkeys, only to be replaced by hundreds more doing the same thing in the same manner. Yet always a few forms remained stationary. They were the police guardians of the ruins, men armed with staves, whose business was to oversee each worker's sack, lest some rare roll of papyri, some rich jewel once adorned with a pampered crocodile of the lake, should be found and stolen. Glimpsed through the red flame of blowing, ruby dust, the scene was a vision of Inferno. We on our mount looking down on it were in company of Dante and Virgil. The rest of the day we gave to a light railway excursion to Ilalun and the brick pyramid of Hawara. There was much laughing and shrieking among the girls of the set. I don't count Monny, who shrieks for nothing less terrible than the largest spiders, as Arabs pushed our trolley cars along the line, and we were frivolous even on the sight of the labyrinth which was, perhaps, copied from the labyrinth of Crete. The set were, frankly, disappointed in the few remains of granite columns and carvings, but vague memories of jewels seen at the Egyptian Museum waked an interest in the brick pyramid tomb at Hawara, where King Amenemhat and his daughter Ptah-Nefru lay for a few thousand years. All of us were eager for the last camp tea when we got home for our expedition, and it was then that the tragedy happened, the tragedy of the Black Lamb. How could I guess, when Yusuf said the camel boys wanted money to buy meat as a feast for the last day, that they meant to buy it alive? When we arrived in camp, an idyllic scene was being enacted. A woolly black lamb with a particularly engaging facial expression was being hospitably entertained by all our men, with the exception of the chef. They formed an admiring ring around it, taking turns in feeding it with bersim, and patting its delightfully innocent head. It was difficult to say which was happier, the charming guest or its kind hosts. "How sweet of them," said Miss Hassett Bean. "I must write a few verses about this for our home paper." Everybody joined with her in thinking the Arabs sweet, and Enid Biddle went round and took up a collection. The men arranged a football match for our benefit, to show their gratitude, and played so well and were so picturesque that Sir John and other ardent sportsmen pressed more money upon them. It was altogether a red letter day for the Camel boys, quite apart from the fact that they would get rid of their noble benefactors to-morrow, and by way of a climax they had what we supposed to be a bonfire at dark. "Aren't all those white figures wonderful, grouped round the blaze?" asked Monny, who appeared on the whole satisfied with the way in which the desert had taken her. "And look, the flames are reflected on the clouds. I do believe it's going to rain, if such a thing can happen here. I hope it won't spoil the poor darling's celebration. Why, they seem to have something big and black hanging over the fire. What can it be? Oh, it looks awful!" "It is not awful, Mees," Yusuf, standing near, good-naturedly reassured her. "It very nice. It is the lamb, they cook it for their supper. The gentleman, milord, he gave them money to buy it." "Lamb!" shrieked Monny, in a wild voice which brought a crowd round us. "Lamb! Not oh, not Yes, Mees, you all see it feeded when you come home, when you say it so sweet. Camel boys find sweeter now." "Oh!" the girl exclaimed. "Fiends! They invited that lamb here, and brought it in their arms, and played with it, and did everything they could to make it think it was having a pleasant afternoon, and then they killed it!" "Yes, of course, Mees," said Yusuf, puzzled. "Why else for, milord tell they can buy it. They kill and pound it up to make good, and soon they eat it in honour of the gentlemen and ladies who have been so kind this nice trip." "I should like to kill them!" gasped Monny, preparing to cry, and flinging herself into Biddy's arms. "Oh, somebody give me a hanky, quick!" We all felt mechanically in our pockets, but I, being nearest, was first in the field. It was a shock to see Monny wave my handkerchief away with a gesture of horror and bury her face in a far inferior one tendered by Anthony. "No wonder!" exclaimed Miss Hassett Bean, who is not, as a rule, a Monnyite. "You're quite right, Miss Gilder. Lord Ernest Borrow, I don't see much difference between you and a murderer." For a minute I did not know what she meant. Then it broke upon me that the Arab's monstrous breach of hospitality to the lamb was laid at my door. I jabbered explanations, but no one listened, and just then the rain, which nobody had believed in, seized the opportunity of coming down in floods. The camels roared with rage and surprise, the camel boys swore Arab oaths, the fires sputtered, and what became of the half-cooked lamb I shall never know. We rushed for the dining tent, all soaked in an instant, with the exception of Brigit and Monny, whom Antoun protected with a long cloak. Dinner was a gloomy feast, which might have been composed of funeral baked meats, though the chef himself came to the door and vowed by all his saints that the lamb cutlets were not from that lamb. So well did he exonerate himself, so eloquently did he protest that he had done nothing to do with the camel boys' orgy, that another special collection was taken up for him. "Poor dear old gentleman," sighed Miss Hassett Bean. "I shall never be able to forget him. When I'm out of this awful country of cannibals, and safe in my own home, he will simply haunt me, passing his respectable old age, black though he is, chasing across deserts on camels, wrapped in a blanket and covered with chicken coops, at the mercy of any queer Christian who can afford to pay for him. It's a tragedy." Perhaps she wrote her poem about the cook instead of the camel boys. Luckily, however, at the last moment I remembered a superstition of the ancient Egyptians. They were in the habit of sacrificing a black lamb to propitiate Set, the sender of storms. Our lamb was black, and at the hour of his untimely death a storm was coming up. The dreadful deed, therefore, was turned into a rite. End of chapter 15, part 2.